Hello, all, and welcome back to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and, well, we missed last week, but hopefully that can be forgiven. It was the holidays. We were busy. We were doing stuff. It's that time where, you get to be with family and friends and all that special stuff. You guys are our family and friends too, but hopefully you'll forgive a little bit of a break. But I am back with my wonderful co-host to talk to you about the wonderful world of movies. As you know, if you listen to our show, we love to review movies, either current or classic. And this week, we're going to be coming at you with not one, but two current film reviews, Pitch Perfect 3, as well as The Shape of Water. But before we jump into our movie reviews this week, let me reintroduce you to my wonderful co-host, because it's been a hot minute. Jim Pugliafico is here. Jim, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, babe. And hey, it's 2018 now, right?
It is. Yeah.
So says the calendar on my wall.
A new year, same old me. Welcome to the podcast, everybody.
I'll take the same old you every year for the rest of my life, babe, if you'll have me.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And Will Lindis is here too. Welcome, Will.
Hey there, Brad and Jim. Happy New Year, listeners. Happy New Year. So glad to be back with all of you talking movies and diving into what will assuredly be a better year, right? Right? Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, we will definitely see if that comes to pass. Fingers crossed that will be the case. But you know what? 2017 was full of some pretty amazing, some pretty spectacular, some pretty phenomenal films, and some not so great, some not so spectacular, some not so phenomenal films. We've got two big movie reviews we're going to be talking about this week, but we want to put something on your radar for next week. Speaking of what was great and what was not, we are going to be diving into our annual MBP awards next week. It's sort of our version of the Oscars, if you will. We like to give awards for things like the biggest tearjerker or the hottest actor in a film. We're going to be releasing our categories on our Facebook page, and that'll be going up this week. And you guys, as our many valued listeners, however you want to put it, are going to have a chance to access that list and weigh in with your picks in our categories ahead of next week's show, where we will, of course, give out our awards and maybe talk about some of the comments and rankings you guys put out there as well. So be on the lookout for the MVP awards listing. Guys, that is our fourth honorary co-host in the background you're hearing. Our cat Poe is meowing very loudly for some reason. So
yeah, I guess Poe is really angling for like a best guest host position, which unfortunately, Poe, I hate to break it to you, hate to be that guy, that's not one of our categories. But the 10 categories that we do have will go out on social media this week. Sorry, Poe.
Yeah, she just announced the award for the person that stopped petting her 2 minutes ago to start petting her again. That's why she's meowing. As soon as I stop, there she goes. Nice.
She says, "Screw you guys, I'm going Poe."
Yeah,
that didn't work. That did not work at all.
Okay, this is 2018. This is the year of taking chances. They're not all going to be home runs, but if you don't swing, you can't hit.
Indeed. Oh, goodness. Well, we've got two big movies that we're going to discuss. We're going to go ahead and jump in here in just a second. Want to give a quick shout out to those of you who are listening live with us right now. Looks like there's a couple of you guys who are with us. Of course, we're recording on an odd day this week, coming back from the holidays and scheduling, and I came back with a really bad cold from San Diego. So sorry we're coming at you on a different night this week. We'll be back to our regular schedule next week. That, of course, being Monday night at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Jim, Will, what do you think? Are we ready to get into our movies this week?
I think so. I think, it's been so long. We've seen lots of movies. We try to pick two that we think, people also had a chance to see over the holidays. So this could be fun.
Yeah, I'm Aka ready.
Aka ready.
All right, pitches. Then let's do this. We're going to start with Pitch Perfect 3. As I mentioned a few momentitos ago, we are going to be discussing these films, both Pitch Perfect 3 and Shape of Water, spoiler free. We'll give you plenty of fair warning before we open the can of spoiler worms. So if you haven't seen these movies yet, you're kind of on the fence. Should I see it? Should I not see it? Fret not. We'll give you our opinions. And then we'll give you plenty of time to step away, hit pause, do what you got to do so that you're not spoiled. All of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Pitch Perfect 3. All right. So, Will, let's frickin' Aka do this. Why don't you start us off? Give us the basic premise of Pitch Perfect 3. It's been a little while since Pitch Perfect 2. And spoiler free, of course, is this worth seeing in theaters, waiting for rental, skipping it? What do you think?
Absolutely. So here we are with Pitch Perfect 3, and we get to dive back into the story of the Barton Bellas, now just the Bellas as they've graduated from college. In the last movie, they won the world championship, and now the girls have gone their own ways, different jobs, different career paths, but they get back together for one last singing competition at this overseas USO tour, with the idea being that whichever team does the best will get to be the opening act for DJ Khaled on his tour. Anyways, while they're there, they have to deal with the fact that they're getting a little bit older. They're dealing with moving on with their careers. They have to deal with the competition, and they have to deal with some other hijinks as well. As far as this movie, in terms of whether or not it's a good movie or not, I think that that's actually an immaterial part of this discussion. I think that I actively enjoyed the first movie. I actively did not enjoy this. Let me rephrase that. I thought the second one was not a good movie that I still ended up having fun with, even though it was very clearly a bad movie. The third one is somewhere in between the two. I think that this movie has some very, very apparent flaws from a technical perspective, from a narrative perspective. There are a large number of the supporting cast members who showed back up because the group picture would not look great without them there, but they had next to nothing to do in the story. That said, it's still kind of fun. Like you get to hear the group doing mashups of and a cappella versions of popular songs. That's part of the magic of this. You get to see Anna Kendrick in the lead role, who, you know, that's a mileage may vary depending on who you are, but I personally enjoy her. Rebel Wilson gets a lot more improv moments in this one. So you'll either love that or you'll hate that, depending on what your tolerance level is for Rebel Wilson. I don't know. This is okay. I did not hate this movie. I don't know that I necessarily liked it, but I had a fun enough time with it. So whatever, it's fine.
Whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, my recommendation on this is you already know if you want to see this or not.
All right.
That's Will's like urging you to go see this one.
Yeah. 5 stars. Do not miss.
All right. Jim, how about you?
Yeah, I think I was somewhere below Will on this one. I really was, you know, like you, Will. I really kind of dug the first movie. Kind of like with Magic Mike. I mean, that first movie, discovering these characters and this kind of little world that they set up. It was a lot of fun in the first movie. Second movie was a letdown. This one was also a letdown for me. Just, you know, and I was rooting for this movie to kind of have this franchise, assuming that this is the last movie. Everything I think we see says this may be the last one. But I was kind of rooting for it to go out on a high note. Get it? But it didn't, and that was sad. And part of the problem is, I mean, there's really there's really not much going on in here. The stakes are, you know, this movie has a crazy kidnapping plot. It has a crazy father-daughter relationship plot. It has a very weak singing competition plot, because I guess these groups want to go on tour with DJ Khaled. Is that his name? DJ Khaled? I don't even. Am I supposed to know who DJ Khaled is going into this movie?
I think he's the guy from the T-Mobile commercial, Jim. I think that's all you need to know.
Like, was he set up in the second movie? I don't remember that because I had no idea. Like, I'm like, why do they want to go on tour with this DJ? Like,
he's an actual music. Like, he played himself in this. He wasn't
He should stick to the earphones and the thumpa because there was a scene in this movie with him that I thought was like one of the worst acted scenes of the year. I don't know that Anna Kendrick I like. Rebel Phillips, unfortunately, she's reduced to one repetitive fat joke throughout the whole movie, and that's really off-putting when she's not really given anything else to do. I mean, there are people who may find some enjoyment out of this movie because they love going back into that world of these singers. I mean, you have Haley Steinfeld in this movie, and she's really great in other films, and to see her in this movie just like it hurts my heart a little bit. I can't recommend this movie. There may have been some fun moments here and there, but overall, definitely not worth it for me.
You could even say, Jim, that it's tearing you apart, Lisa.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's terrible.
Hey, so before I weigh in with my my thoughts on this film, two things. One, a new listener just sent me a message. Scott, want to give it a shout out to you. Hey, Scott, good to see you here. Hope you're enjoying the show. Two, a couple of friends of ours, Jim, as you may know, are currently in Hawaii. In fact, they are at the very spot, Jim, where you and I got married just a few months ago.
Right, excellent.
Yeah. So that, of course, is Sam and Steven from here in Tucson. And let me go ahead. I'm just going to put this up on the screen real quick. Take a look at these two cuties.
I was going to say they better not be in the hotel room because I was going to say you get your asses out of that hotel room and go see Hawaii. And I'm glad they are.
Unless there are things to do in hotel rooms.
There are.
That's true.
But
that's true.
That is an adorable picture of two amazing guys. That's awesome.
Yeah, excellent. Love the spot. Love the picture. Love you guys. Thanks for the picture.
Yeah, we love those guys. And Jim, you and I, we need to get back there. Maybe we'll jump on that idea of like renting a big group house together. Sometime.
It's only been 7 months or 8 months or so, and I'm like already jonesing to get back there. But got to build up that bank account again.
That's true. That's true. Definitely.
that shit ain't cheap.
Oh goodness! Hey, can you guys see me?
Did it switch back? Just disappeared. We saw Brad, and then there was no Brad.
Oh goodness! I knew I should have, not screen shared because something weird is going on.
All right. We can still hear you.
Just pretend that I'm Charlie from Charlie's Angels, right? Because you never see Charlie. So, like, I'll just be a voice on the phone. Mm-hmm. Angels, I want you to talk about Pitch Perfect 3. Will giving us the Charlie's Angels pose. I love it.
I'll do the same over here. Let's see.
Oh, now Jim's doing it.
We look just like the Charlie's Angels.
Yeah, you totally do. You totally do. Well, for those of you who are watching live, unfortunately, it looks like you're not going to get to see me for a hot minute. But I'll just keep this brief. I enjoyed Pitch Perfect 3 more than I thought I would, but that's not really saying a lot. I've never been the biggest fan of this movie franchise. And unfortunately, as the movies have gone on, they've gotten worse and worse for me. I will say Britney Spears' Toxic has been in my head ever since I saw the movie 5 days ago.
Oh, was that one of the songs was in the movie?
Yeah, that's the one. I don't know if it's a spoiler or not. Say this,
the boat song.
The boat song. There you go. But you know that song, right? It's the one's like dun 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 dun.
I think I know that.
Toxic. Yeah. Anyway, this movie, I don't know. If you've been following the franchise, if you like Pitch Perfect, go out, see it. It's fun. We're kind of, in one of those spots right now. There are some Oscar-y movies kind of coming out, but if you're looking for something fun, I don't know why I'm gesturing at the camera. You can't see me. This might be a good one to go out and check out. So that's my thought. Any other spoiler-free thoughts before we do a brief spoiler section for Pitch Perfect 3?
Whoa,
Yeah,
Brad just whipped his dick out on camera, and we'd never.
Oh, we can't see it. Yeah. No, I will say that the musical selections in this one seemed pretty up to date, right? Pretty current. I don't know. I'm probably not the one to speak on this, but maybe you guys know. But it didn't seem like there was any real like classic selections, or I mean, I recognize some of those songs, but I'm not. I'm not really hip on today's music scene, pop music scene. So, but they sounded like more current songs. Am I correct here?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, a lot of the songs were, I would say, borderline modern. Like you mentioned "Toxic" by Britney Spears, and that's a song that's what 15 years old now.
Wow.
Oh my God, is it 50? Oh my God, something like that. Anyways, but I will say that song itself seems to be having a bit of a resurgence in popular culture with Britney Spears headlining the Las Vegas show. I think she performed it at the New Year's Eve thing. So, yeah, and again, DJ Khaled is, he's fairly big right now. So yeah, popular enough.
So how does a DJ like DJ Khaled get that big? Does he like have a big hit on the radio or something? Or I'm trying to figure out like how a DJ like him would get to be like so big.
Well, a lot of times when someone's like goes by like the name of like like DJ something, it doesn't necessarily mean that they just play music. His big thing is, and I am by no say an expert or anything like that, but he does a lot of stuff with like like music production as well as other things. So he's one of those guys who has his fingers in a few different things.
Gotcha. So like maybe a music producer or something like that.
Yeah.
Who also performs some stuff. Yeah. And I'm not that familiar with him. So maybe again, this is probably another reason why this movie is like not really maybe for me,
Maybe, although it is for some people. Austin Glenn, who's hanging out with us in the chat. Hey, Austin, glad to have you with
Austin.
us. Says this was a good movie, in his opinion. And I think it's important to keep in mind that even though we weren't the biggest fans of this franchise, it has a pretty big following. A lot of people on my Facebook and my Twitter feed, not that I'm on Twitter a whole lot, I'm trying to fix that, have been talking about this film and how much they have enjoyed it. So it's one of those things where I think if this franchise maybe grabbed you from the beginning, maybe you're kind of invested, you keep seeing the movies. But I don't know that like just coming into this franchise like on the third movie would necessarily grab anybody. I think this franchise kind of came about from the popularity of like the whole like Glee phenomenon like 8 years ago, right?
Glee was a big part of it. And then also, I mean, any of the singing competition shows, because there's a competition that's the core of each of these movies, right? So you can trace the popularity of this back to like American Idol and The Voice and X Factor. You can also trace it to, and I won't remember the name of it, but I think it was called like the Sing Off, but the music competition show that was like the a cappella groups.
Yeah,
it's got like Ben Folds in it, this is a kind of a popular thing right now. You even have groups like Pentatonics, who are a cappella groups that have made big careers for themselves over the past several years through kind of being on YouTube and putting out their music in sort of like in a way that is very accessible to people nowadays. So yeah, and exactly to your point, Brad, like I think it would be hard for me to argue that this is like a technically sound or like well-written movie, but I still kind of had some fun with it. And that's something that I can't say about a lot of movies that I would put sort of in the same technical category, so to speak. Like a lot of times, like a bad movie is a bad movie, a good movie is a good movie, or whatever. But this one, sort of like the last one, is one that has very, very transparent flaws. And yet I still walked away. Like I had an okay time at the theater. I don't regret that, super expensive tickets. Well, I movie passed it. But I don't regret that super expensive popcorn that went along with it. I think you're gonna have fun. I think people are gonna have fun with this by and large, especially if you do enjoy any of those DNA things that we talked about, either the Pitch Perfect series itself, or movie musicals, or music competition shows, or a cappella groups, any of those things, I think you'll have a good enough time with this movie.
And the good thing about this franchise is at least it's consistent in terms of what you're signing up for, right? Like, you know that you're going to get Rebel Wilson being Rebel Wilson in these movies. You know that you're going to get Anna Kendrick, you know, being an entitled, like, snooty girl. Like, you know these things, and you get them. It delivers on those things. So there's some satisfaction, I think, that comes from that, if you've kind of been following along. Jim, you mentioned Haley Steinfeld earlier. I really liked her in the second movie. I think the second movie kind of gave, you know, her character a chance to really kind of like branch out and reinvigorate things a little bit. I would have liked to have seen a little more of that in this film. I feel like a lot of the focus shifted back.
Yeah, she has to play the dumb girl, so you know, she doesn't really get a lot to do in terms of her performance.
Right, but you know, I don't know. There's,
and I will say, for this movie, it seemed like they downplayed the plot, the normal formula for this movie, where it's like a big competition and they have to beat all these teams and so forth. There was a competition in this, but it wasn't really the forefront of the plot. And I think what they were trying to do is maybe, hey, we've done that the last two movies. Let's try to get away from it and do something a little different. So it kind of felt like a mashup between like Pitch Perfect and like the new Baywatch movie. Like, kind of had this like heist kidnapping plot in the middle of a Pitch Perfect movie. And you know, it didn't, I don't know. I give them credit for trying to do something different. I just don't know that it really worked.
You know, it's so funny that you bring up Baywatch, Jim, because at one point, like, and it's partially in the trailer, so I feel like I can bring up the boat scene. We're watching the boat scene, and I'm like, wait a second. Have I seen this before? Like, where did I see this? And then I was like, wait, The Rock should be on the boat. Why should Baywatch, that's why.
Yeah. It felt a little like that.
And to its credit, like, I think that's one of the things that it does change up its formula a little bit by adding some kind of a threat and some danger that's outside of just the competitions. But it does so at the expense of some of the characters that we've seen over the last few. You mentioned the Haley Steinfeld character, who had a very definite arc in the second one, which was, I'm the young member of the team who wants to learn how to write songs, and that becomes a big part of that story. Like, she's going to write the first original song for the Bellas, and they literally jump into this one with, oh yeah, I haven't really written anything yet, and that's her entire arc, is kind of a throwaway thing. Some of the other characters, like Esther Dean, who plays Cynthia Rose, who is the lesbian in the group, and Hannah Mae Lee, who plays Lily, the one who kind of just talks like this under her breath.
Right.
They had those two characters, they never really had like giant story arcs in the first two, but I would consider them scene stealers. Like, they were the type of people that you could give a little bit of screen time to, and they would just take it and run with it. And one of my disappointments with this film is they seem to have next to nothing to do, whether it be closing out their stories or even just enough jokes or enough like screen presence to really like let the things that I've enjoyed about them in the past shine here. So it almost feels like they were brought back not only because, like, again, I mentioned it before, like that the poster or the group photos or whatever would look odd if they weren't there, like if they were missing those important Bellas. So that's a shame.
Yeah.
Indeed. Well,
get the spoilers.
I was going to say, why don't we do a quick spoiler section? I don't know how much we really want to dive into spoilers for this movie, especially given that they're kind of a retread of the first two films. But let's go ahead. We're going to go into that great spoiler night, you guys. We are going to unpack some spoilers for Pitch Perfect 3. This is the part where I awkwardly ramble, so that if you need to hit the mute button, come back in 10 minutes, use the handy dandy time index in the show notes. If you're listening on digital tape delay, just skip ahead, feel free. But spoilers are officially fair game. I want to start with John Lithgow. What did you guys think of him in this film?
I love John Lithgow generally. really bad Australian accent in here so that he could match up with I guess so he could match up with Rebel Phillips normal accent. Because I'm pretty sure John Lithgow is not Australian or British, but he did put on a kind of a bad Australian accent in here.
So I have a question real quick, and
yeah.
I promise I'm not being a douchey dick who like has to correct people when they're wrong. I'm genuinely confused. Is it Rebel Phillips or Rebel Wilson? Because I've heard both from different sources.
Sorry, it's Rebel Wilson. My fault.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, honestly, I wasn't trying to be a dick.
And I said it. I did it twice or 3 times. So yeah. It's Rebel Wilson. I don't know why I get mixed up. Wilson Phillips. I'm getting.
That's exactly what Wilson Phillips. Yeah.
I think so. Here's the thing, Jim. I think you're not alone because I've seen several people doing that on Facebook. They're like, "Oh my god, I loved Rebel Phillips and Pitch Perfect." So don't worry, you're good.
Rebel Wilson. Sorry, Rebel.
Also, Jim's doing the editing.
When you come on the show someday, I will. Yeah, when you come on the show someday, I will make it up to you.
Jim's doing the editing, so he could very easily make it to where like he goes back and goes, yeah, and there's that one scene with Rebel Wilson who. I really want that to happen.
Yeah. I'll make a little Wilson clip that I'll put in there.
Just work it in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Lithgow shows up. Nice to see him, but again, he provides the heavy he does some of the emotional stuff at the beginning, and then the heavy, he turns out to be, of course, a total D-bag, derelict, criminal dad. To Rebel Wilson's character, Fat Amy, as we know her. Like I said, the bad accent really kind of took me out. I'm like, oh, they didn't really need to do that. I mean, especially if they've been estranged for a long time, like people do lose their accents, so you don't need to give him an Australian accent.
Yeah. Or I mean, if you're really gonna go with this story arc, just get some. I love John Lithgow, but maybe cast someone else. Cast someone who can do the accent a little better.
Yeah, what's his name? I am from Hunt for the Wilder People. Could have been.
Do we know of any Australians who like to sing in movies, like any at all? Who are in who sing in movies all the time, including movies that are currently in theaters? I can't think of any. Hugh Jackman. Anywho,
yeah, I know.
No, so. My problem with the Rebel Wilson stuff in this movie was I felt like they really dipped too heavily into her stuff. Not only was she the one with the father issue storyline, but she's also the one with the now it's a crime heist, and also now she's inexplicably like a ninja badass. And that's a lot of stuff to give. Let's face it, like Rebel Wilson's role in this is sort of the sidekick to Anna Kendrick's character, Becca, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a thing, and at least it's for me, this is something that always sticks in my craw, but whenever you watch a sequel and the sidekick from the previous one becomes kind of the main character of the sequel, 9 times out of 10, it's insufferable. It gave us the worst short of the year in Olaf's Frozen Adventure. It gave us the worst Cars movie, which was the one with Mater taking the lead. There's just a lot of stuff that does not go over super well when the sidekick has to take over. And I feel like this really was, Becca had a lot of things to do, but it was the same shit she's done in the other ones. The only one that really got a lot of new stuff was Rebel Wilson, and it hogged so much screen time that it just made those parts a little hard to watch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's dogs and cats on the show tonight.
It's interesting that we mentioned this Anna Kendrick thing, because her character Becca, and this it was the second movie, right, where like she gets her chance to branch out from the Bellas and like go on her own and become a music producer, but I don't want to leave the group hanging. And now all of a sudden in the third movie, well, now she's going to be a great singer apparently, and but she doesn't want to leave the group. It just felt like such a big rehash of
that same exact thing. It was like, they're trying to pull her away from the group again. We went through these emotions already before in the last movie, and I don't know. That's unfortunately just not a lot of ideas in this movie really worked. And Will, you're 100% right. They took the Fat Amy and they said, her jokes were great in the first 2 movies. Let's give her like 75% more jokes in this movie, and it'll be 75% better. Well, as we know, that formula doesn't usually pan out.
She works very, very well in a limited role, and that's being the character who kind of the quote unquote straight man bounces off of, right? Like she plays weird very well. When the straight man story is to go off and do this own like kind of journey of self-discovery, and she doesn't have anyone to play off of, it almost feels like weird for weird's sake. Like it feels like, a lot of the quirk and the oddity that they gave her wasn't really grounded in anything. Not that these were super like grounded and whatever. And I'm not expecting this to be like a heavy period drama or anything like that. I'm just expecting it to be more like, I don't know, just letting the characters grow a little more organically and give them a little bit more to do. That said, one thing I did appreciate, so Anna Kendrick in this one, she is introduced to a kind of a male music producer who sort of discovers her. And one of the things I liked about this, both kind of behind the scenes and the way it appeared on screen, was their story never played as like a relationship, whether it be sexual or dating or anything like that. And I read a little bit on this afterwards. Like apparently in the first draft of the script, he was supposed to fall for her, and that was supposed to be part of it. And Kendrick sort of flexed the muscle and said, hey, I don't want Becca's story to be like, I finally got discovered because I'm sleeping with the producer. So they nixed all of that and just made it to where it was more based on her talent. I appreciated that. I think that did make her arc a little bit better than any of the disastrous ways that it could have gone.
Yeah, they did this thing where they kind of paired them all up, right? With most of them up with dudes from the military outfit, I think it was, that right. they were doing USO shows for, which was kind of the only angle I not the love stuff, but not the relationship stuff, but I kind of like to see that USO stuff, and those performances, I thought, for me at least, were kind of the highlight of the movie.
Especially when the other acts were all really solid. The country group, and then there was
the fake Cranberries, and
Moist something, whatever the group.
Evermoist.
Yeah, a terrible name.
I love that name.
But all of the other groups were really good, and I guess that was another like sticking point for me, was that we're presented with these groups, like these 3 other groups: the hip hop group, the country group, and the female rock group, that are all presented in the first battle as better, quote unquote, than the Bellas. And all of a sudden, like, the Bellas started getting way more popular than them. And it never really felt like, I didn't really get that good moment where like, oh, this is where the tides have turned. This is where the Bellas stepped up their great game. It just felt like kind of arbitrary. Like, oh, now all of a sudden, like, the groups that were good suck now. I don't know. And part of that's because the story was less concerned about the movie was less concerned about the competition stuff and wanted to get to some of the other things. But I think to that point, if you're going to present the competition stuff, it needs to at least be, well developed and well written. And I kind of miss that. I wish that the groups had a little bit more to do.
Right. Agreed.
Well, this may have been the final film in the
Do you think it is?
Perfect franchise.
All the marketing seems to make it like last call pitches. I've seen it listed as the Pitch Perfect trilogy. The last, I mean, we're in spoilers. Like the end of the story is with, Becca finally being able to sort of let go of the group and go off and do her own thing. So I think it's planned as being the last one. Now, who knows? They may come back to it and say, gosh, these things kind of make some money. And, I know that, what's her name on it? Elizabeth Banks is, I think she's one of the producers, and she's really big on.
She directed the second movie.
Yeah. And she's been doing a lot of, like, she's become like legit rich, just, kind of producing films on the side, which is pretty impressive. I can see her wanting to dip back into this, but I think for right now, they're putting it on ice.
I mean, they could always go the route of Glee right? Like the high school glee club is still at that high school, even though the people in it have gone on to college. You have new students that come in. Maybe the older students like come back for cameos or something. You know, they could always do like Pitch Perfect, The Next Generation or something, you know. There's a mechanism there for it if they want it.
Yeah, I watched the spinoff where they take the magician guy from the first one and they follow him as he becomes a Tony-winning Broadway star with Dear Everett Hansen.
It wouldn't surprise me at all to see them, you know, maybe sometime down the road resurrect this franchise. Or I'm calling it right now with the new Mamma Mia sequel coming out. The Bellas may show up on the island to perform. to perform at Meryl Streep's funeral. I'm calling it right now.
So that'll be like in the third one, right? Like
yeah,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
Mama Thria.
Yeah,
oh, that's good. I like that. I like that. Well, oh man. All right. Well, guys, we have a whole nother movie to talk about. I have a feeling it may be a more fertile ground for discussion. Maybe we'll see. I don't know, but The Shape of Water is our other film that we want to discuss this week. Jim, Will, how do we feel about making that transition?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's jump in, dive in.
No. Oh, there we go. All right, dive in. We got Will. No fish puns from you.
No. They will come, but right now I feel like I'm drowning in this group. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh boy. All right. Well, then that said, we're going to go ahead and switch gears and talk about Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water. If you've not yet seen this movie, don't fret. Don't worry. Don't fear. It's all good. We're going to give you some base impressions of the film, as well as a little synopsis of what it's about. That way, if you're on the fence, we might be able to help sway you one way or another if you value our opinion. We hope you do. But we will not spoil you without fair warning, so do not worry. All of that said, here we go, our discussion of The Shape of Water. All right, so Jim, I know this was a movie you were hugely looking forward to, so seems only fitting that you kick us off for this one. Give us the basic setup of this film, and this is worth people checking out in theaters, renting, skipping. What do you think?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about The Shape of Water, and this was a movie, as Brad said, that months ago when this trailer came out, I had my eyes on it. I'm a big fan of some of Guillermo del Toro's movies, specifically Pan's Labyrinth, which is kind of on my all-time list still. But he's done, so many great movies like the Hellboy series, most recently Crimson Peak. We know about Pacific Rim, and I think he's going to be involved in the new Pacific Rim movie to some degree.
Not as a director, but
probably as a producer. So I saw this movie and I'm like, oh, I'm getting serious, like Pan's Labyrinth kind of vibes from this, mostly because of the creature. But let me get into the premise. I'll just read the premise from like IMDb. In a 1960s research facility, a lonely janitor forms a unique relationship with a strange amphibious creature that is being held in captivity. So as it says, this movie is kind of a period piece set during the 1960s in the Cold War with Russia, which does kind of come, between the U.S. and Russia, which does kind of come into this science and kind of the race for discovery was a big part of the 1960s, and that's played in here, which I really liked. This movie stars Sally Hawkins in the lead role, Richard Jenkins as her friend in this movie. Michael Shannon is in this, Octavia Spencer. It's got a great cast. Doug Jones is in this, and Doug Jones is kind of the guy behind the mask, right? He was the creature in Pan's Labyrinth. I think he's been in several of Guillermo del Toro's movies. He's also the creature in this one. No spoiler that there is a creature. We could call this, what I liked about this is, first of all, it's an original story. Now, I say original, although you could see a lot of heavy leanings in this movie toward other classic stories, like whether it be Creature from the Black Lagoon, Beauty and the Beast is in here a little bit. So I kind of like that. It leans on other known stories, but it does feel like its own original movie. I really like this movie. Love the performances in here, especially Sally Hawkins and Richard Jenkins. The movie centers on, and this is no spoiler, but the relationship between Sally Hawkins and this creature. But the relationship I really kind of dug was the relationship between Eliza, which is Sally Hawkins' character, and Giles, which is Richard Jenkins' character. They have been friends for a while. I don't want to spoil anything about their relationship. We'll get into that in spoilers. But I really dug that relationship because it was kind of a different kind of relationship that you see between a man and a woman on screen. Like I said, I really like this movie. I like a lot of what Guillermo del Toro does. It's got his imagination all over this movie, just in the feel, the tone. There's so many cool scenes I can't wait to talk about with you guys. But yes, this is a definitely C for me. I don't think you can go wrong with this movie. So this is a big thumbs up for me.
All right, so we got a big thumbs up from Jim. For me, I got to tell you, as is so often the case with movies Jim wants to see, this was not one that I was excited for from the trailers. And Jim, I say that lovingly because you always end up wanting to see these movies, and I watch the trailers, I'm like,
you resist.
God, I don't want to see that. And then I go because I love you and I love our podcast, and I'm like, well, I'll see it. And then I come out of it fucking loving the movie. And that's certainly the case here with The Shape of Water as well. I think with the trailer, it just looked like Creature of the Black Lagoon meets Beauty and the Beast. And I don't know. It just didn't really appeal to me, I guess, on the surface.
On the surface, but not deep underneath.
Brad, we lost your audio.
Your audio cut out.
Can you hear me?
Yep, just came back. Oh, lost you again.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, just came back.
Okay, I don't know what's up.
Yeah, we pick up right after what you said, like Beauty and the Beast and Creature from the Black Lagoon on the surface.
The joys of doing it live. All right, in 5. Yeah, something about the mashup just between this feeling of like Creature of the Black Lagoon meets Beauty and the Beast just didn't really appeal to me very much on the surface. But then when I actually went beneath the surface and saw the film and started to kind of unpack some of these things, there was a lot there for me to love. Sally Hawkins, I mean, she's amazing. I haven't seen her in something in a really long time, though. And I think I don't know. I kind of forgot how much I really like her. She's kind of spunky. She's kind of playful. And she's got an energy that I just really dig. She was great here. Of course, Richard Jenkins, Jim, you already mentioned how awesome he was as Giles. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. Michael Shannon, we got Michael Shannon being Michael Shannon. There's not a lot of difference or nuance in his performances sometimes. But someone I was super surprised to see show up in this film was David Hewlett, who played my favorite character, Rodney McKay, on Stargate Atlantis. He was my favorite part of that show for 5 years that it was on. And I had no idea he was going to be in the film. And he doesn't have a huge role in this movie. He plays one of the other scientists or doctors or whatever. But it was a real treat to see him show up here. So in terms of the creature, the design for the creature was pretty interesting. We'll talk a little bit more in spoilers about, some of the functionality of that creature and that design. But man, I got to give mad props to Doug Jones, who always does a phenomenal job performing in these roles. I mean, we really don't get to see him as like human Doug Jones. In this film, he's straight up amphibian creature, but he sells it like even in small ways that you wouldn't necessarily think about, like just the way that he like moves sort of a thinned hand, or the way that he like moves his neck sometimes and kind of wiggles his eyebrows a little bit. You know, when you're wearing that much makeup and prosthetic, I think it can be really hard to have sort of a nuanced performance, but man, somehow that guy gets the job done. So last person I want to call it here is Octavia Spencer. You guys, I think seriously she's becoming my like favorite modern like actress in film. Seriously, I would see her in pretty much fucking anything that she does. She's amazing in this movie, and yes, she's kind of playing kind of the same characters in some of the other films that she does. But I really buy the chemistry of the friendship between her character Zelda and Sally's character Eliza. I think that, you know, it feels real, it's authentic, and because of that, some things that happen later on in the movie sort of pay off. They feel earned, and that makes it work for me. So this is a big, huge win. Absolutely, I think this is worth going to see right now. If it's in your area and you can see it, do it. I don't know if it's going to get any kind of recognition come award season or anything like that, unfortunately. But, you know, if you kind of like love stories, if you like weird kind of out there creaturey type things, this is a beautiful mashup of the two. So get to it and do it. Will, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, this is one that I had been looking forward to for a bit, and primarily because I love Guillermo del Toro. You know, this is a guy who I think is one of the most visionary directors that we have working nowadays, with a style that is very unmistakably his. You can't help but see a Del Toro movie and go like, okay, yeah, that's a Del Toro movie. And I was so pleasantly surprised, maybe not surprised is the right word, but I was so pleasantly just like pleasantly happy with the fact that this movie hit and exceeded all of my expectations. I think what works so well about it on the surface is, of course, you do have this idea of what if the creature from the Black Lagoon, but instead of him taking the woman off into the water because he's kidnapping her, it's because the two of them are in love. Like that vision of the creature and the woman willingly falling in love with each other, not through Stockholm syndrome, not through kidnapping, but because of an actual relationship and connection that the two share. That part's really cool. But even more so for me, and fitting for this podcast actually, is the fact that this film is all about outsiders. We're set in sort of this story that is about these like straight-laced government men running this facility in the Cold War, and then you've got this trio of friends. You've got, of course, the Sally Hawkins character, Eliza, who is mute. And you've got Octavia Spencer, whose character is, well, black, because Octavia Spencer is black. And you've got Richard Jenkins playing Giles, who is a gay man. And the three of them very much represent kind of that other, kind of the opposite of what it means to be like an able-bodied, straight-laced white male in this era. And so the fact that you've got this trio banding together in support of an alternative love, I think that that's very fitting for some of the things that we represent here on this podcast. I think we're all about the outsiders, the outcasts, and those who support love over, over anything that might stand in its way. The performances are spectacular. Sally Hawkins is one of those people who you can put in just about anything that you would, anything that you would want. I would watch it. Octavia Spencer is really getting she's building up her career as someone who's willing to take chances. Like, she's not letting herself fit inside of a box. I mean, even this year we saw her in a weird little crime movie, Small Town Crime, with John Hawkes, so yeah. I'm loving that she's playing, just playing outside of the lines as much as possible. Richard Jenkins is just absolutely stellar here. Doug Jones does so much with his body, and we mentioned him before, but I'm so incredibly impressed with not just from this movie, but the entire body of work of Michael Stuhlbarg this year. This is a guy who, depending on how things go, may have a bit of a record or be in history. He has 3 films out this year: The Post, The Shape of Water, and Call Me by Your Name, that are all potentially that all could potentially be up for Best Picture at the Oscars. And I mean, he's great, you know, and he deserves all the credit for any role that he's playing in that. The last person to have had 3 films in the Oscar, you know, in the Best Picture at the same time was John C. Reilly back in like 2002, and then before that it was like the 1940s. So it's like it's a very small group of people who have had 3 Best Picture films the same year. So I just thought that was a cool little tidbit. This movie, we'll see what happens come Oscar time. I think it got the most, or up there for the most, nominations at the Golden Globes with 7. So that's a good sign. Like, that's a good sign that this film might be, you know, might do fairly well come award season. But yeah, this is a great movie, one of the best of the year. You should absolutely go watch it.
Yeah, I second everything you said. All the performances are really good. The one thing that, you know, at times this Guillermo del Toro isn't just a writer director. He's a creator, right? He's a very imaginative creator. He has these worlds in his mind, and sometimes the worlds that he create and kind of the plot that he wants to, the story that he wants to tell, kind of don't always mesh 100%. I mean, there's moments in the movie where, and we could talk about some of them in spoilers, where things happen and I'm like, and it takes me out a little bit, like, I don't really know if that could happen. But then again, I'm watching kind of a fantasy movie, so maybe I shouldn't be thinking that way. This movie walks that line. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I love the movie. There are maybe some things we can talk about in spoilers to get into it a little bit further.
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a lot to unpack when it comes to spoilers for this movie. So any final non-spoiler thoughts before we take it to that place?
Yeah, if I think the other thing for people to keep in mind with this, and this is the thing that throws people off about Guillermo del Toro movies, I think sometimes he gets lumped in as a horror director, and he's not a horror director. He is a gothic romance / urban fantasy director. Like, that's the type of film that he makes. I think that's what hurt him with Crimson Peak a little bit. I think people were expecting like a gory bloodbath instead of this like kind of creepy ghost love story type thing. And I think the same thing could happen here too. There are certainly dark and subversive elements to this movie. And of course, part of that is the direction and art, you know, the art direction and the styling. But at its core, this is a love story. And I think that going into it with that mentality, I think will make all of the difference.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and take the lid off the pot of spoilers, you guys. If you've not yet seen The Shape of Water and you value your virginal innocence, now is the time to step away. Go ahead, hit mute if you have to. If you're listening live, skip ahead to our plugs at the end of the show using the time index in the show notes if you're listening via digital tape delay on iTunes or Stitcher. But we are going to go ahead and spoil the hell out of this movie. And I want to start this up by just asking a question. Will and I were kind of talking about this in chat a little bit. Will, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but Will, you had mentioned that the Richard Jenkins character is gay. And I had asked in the chat if that was a spoiler. And Jim, I wanted to go to you on this one. Did you know ahead of the movie that he was gay, and if that the character was gay? And if you did or did not, would that have changed anything going in? Is that a spoiler? What do you think?
I'm trying to remember if I did or not. I think early on in the movie, we find out, very early on in the movie. So it's not like a big reveal or anything within the movie. And I just don't remember if the trailer tipped it off that he was gay or not. I don't remember, to be honest. But I do remember that, like I said, early on in the movie, we find out that he's gay. And that isn't what really endeared me to his character. I just thought the way he played his relationship, you know, as a like do anything kind of a friend for Eliza. And, you know, we talked about him being kind of, he's an outsider, right? He's not accepted by people. He's gay. He's a middle-aged dude doing his thing, but especially in the 60s,
Right.
It certainly wasn't the same as it is today being gay. I mean, you basically had to hide yourself and who you were. And obviously, Sally Hawkins being a mute, not deaf, but a mute who couldn't speak. And this relationship they had, I thought was just really touching for me.
And I think that's where the magic of this film really exists, is in the relationships, and not just the Eliza, air quotes, the asset, the fishman relationship.
Asset,
although
yeah.
that's the core, right? That's the central part of it. But I love so much that we have this group of outsiders who have these cool little scenes together. And all of them have some cool interactions. It's not just Eliza as the focal point, although she is the star, right? She is the person driving the action. But we get to see her interacting with Giles, and we get to see that friendship and how it works. And we get to see her interacting with Zelda and how that friendship works. And we even get, once they all come into each other's lives through, through the meeting of Eliza, we even get Zelda and Giles interacting a little bit as well. And I think that that's really, really, really good. I think that and that's what Del Toro does so incredibly well here. He lets the characters breathe, and every scene with them feels super organic, and like it was like the path that these characters are on couldn't have been written any other way, because it was written so well. This is how it had to go. That's the magic of cinema. That's the magic of this particular filmmaker and cinema.
Right. I wanted to talk a little bit about Michael Shannon's character.
Shit, we didn't even talk about him before. Yeah.
I mean,
well, I mentioned
yeah.
earlier that Michael Shannon is playing Michael Shannon. I mean, Zod is in this movie as a security, director or whatever.
I think we got a little bit more depth than that, at least for me. Like, you saw a little bit of his family life and how he had kind of this perfect family. He had the 2 kids and the wife, and he at home he's just kind of a normal guy, and then at work he's kind of this monster, right? He's like the real monster of the story. He ends up being the real monster, and obviously I think he's a complex villain in this movie. I think, and that to me makes him a little bit more interesting than just like a one-dimensional cipher or caricature villain. But I love everything that he's in. I just hope that he doesn't get pigeonholed into these roles too much. I really would like to see him, take on more different roles and just being the heavy or the villain. And I know he's kind of got that look to him, that kind of rough-hewn, rugged. He's tall. He's kind of imposing.
Not traditionally attractive, like chiseled attractive. Yeah.
But I'd like to see him do something a little bit more, dramatic and less villainous. Hopefully we'll get to see him do something like that.
I mean, we got to see that a little with and I think that's the where he really shines, is things like, Midnight Special and Take Shelter and stuff like that. He's a great leading man. And I think he's a great villain. Like, I think that he's one of those guys who, if you are looking for a person to walk onto, if your script calls for man to walk onto screen and be remarkably menacing without being overtly menacing, I think that Michael Shannon's your go-to guy. Like, I think he conveys a lot just in his posture and his poise without having to mean mug for the camera or anything along those lines. And again, that's part of his acting chops. But to your exact same point, I don't want to only see that for him. I loved him in this. I don't want to only see this for him going forward.
Yeah. I think it's a good point to make here, because I think about Midnight Special, for instance, right? He was really, really great in that movie, and he's not a villain in that film per se. And so I think he's certainly capable of non-villainy roles, and there's some cool things that he can do. But maybe this is just sort of his easy go-to place. You know what I mean? I don't know, but I agree. I would like to see him kind of branch out a little bit more too.
He can. This can be his bread and butter, but he can get his dessert in other. Maybe we'll see him pop up in some other movies as surprises. That would be great.
He had and I just learned this from IMDb because I sort of ignored this movie, but I guess he was the lead, like, beloved local businessman in a comedy called Pottersville that came out this last year.
Oh yeah.
I didn't watch it. I did not pay attention to it. So I'm hoping that on the one hand, like, it's great that he's getting to play kind of like the, some of those roles, but also it feels like that one got a little buried. So I hope that that isn't what happens with all of his more positive roles.
Yeah, I think I heard some things about that weren't too flattering, and a lot of people I think kind of steered away from it. But I remember Michael Shannon in a movie called 99 Homes, where he was kind of a different kind of villain in that movie, and so that was again more complex. Can we talk about? I know to do like a 180. Can we talk about the sex in this movie?
Sure.
Let's open it up.
We're in spoilers, right?
Do you want to talk about the sex between the woman and the
All
fish? The sex, like a woman on herself? Okay, go.
All of it. People talked about the sex in this movie like there was some like, I heard people before I saw the movie, they're like, "Oh my God, there's fish sex in this movie." I'm like, "What? Really?" Like, and then I watched the movie and I like, that's not the movie I saw. I didn't see a movie that was overtly sexual. There were a couple scenes of her masturbating, and I'm trying to wrap my head around those scenes. And masturbation is a normal thing. Men do it, women do it. Even mute women do it. So I guess that to me, there's nothing wrong with seeing that. I just think it may have closed this movie off to, and there's violence in this movie too. Obviously, there's some pretty horrendous violence toward the end of the movie. I don't know. I just think that maybe in terms of ratings and stuff, that some of the sex in here, especially like the masturbation stuff, probably closed the movie off rating wise to an audience. I don't know. It didn't bother me at all. I think it's normal. I think it's fine to see it. It's like, oh, that's interesting. They don't usually show that in a movie. I can't think of the last time I saw a female masturbation scene in a movie. Maybe Black Swan was that one? I don't know if that counts as one.
Technically, I guess.
Yeah. But there's that, and then there was the scene with the.
Before you move on, I just wanted to say real quick, it's interesting that you mentioned how the sex stuff maybe closes it off from an audience. I've talked to no less than 3 people who refuse to go see this movie because they don't want to see Guillermo del Toro's fish creature fucking a woman. And they think it sounds dirty and nasty and gross, and they won't see the movie because of it. And it's not really that graphic.
It's not in the movie.
We don't even see the fish stick. You know what I mean? Like, it's just sort of.
No, we don't. We don't. Yeah. They describe it, but you don't actually see actual sex. It's more of a romantic scene, isn't it?
Well, if you think about it, like, so this was more of a, like, the romance in this was way more evocative, erotic, sensual than it was overtly sexual or graphic. Certainly it was well directed from that standpoint. We get to see that she is a woman of agency with her own sexual needs and desires. Like, I think the masturbation scenes
exactly
play into that very well. She's not just a kind of like a quote unquote helpless character, which is especially problematic given her, disability, who gets suckered in by this fish creature. She's a woman who is already a sexual being before, and it just evolves into a different way with this creature. Right. And even when it does, it's done so through, like, obviously they come together and there's like touches and caresses, but we don't see like penetration or anything like that. That's not what this movie is. But I will say that that's something that, if you think about that exact argument, not that it's the same people, but I think it's the same mentality. There were a lot of people who wouldn't go see Brokeback Mountain because they didn't want to see all of the, like, the ass fucking and the gay penetration and stuff like that, which is not what the sex scenes in that movie were. But the sex scenes in that movie were much more, again, evocative,
implied.
But I think that there's something about, like, unconventional sex scenes, which some people are more likely to kind of put a wall up and say, hey, I don't know if I want to necessarily see that. I challenge people, if if this is something that you're not 100% sure on, but the rest of the premise sounds good, I assure you, you've probably built it up to be more graphic in your head than it actually is. This is a lovely movie. This is a tender movie. This is like, the romance in this is sensual and sweet, and more than anything.
Well, and I think that's exactly the problem. Is like, obviously we have sort of this sensationalized like fish creature in the trailers, right? And there's this sort of implied romantic sexual connection between them. And so people are assuming, based on little bits of information they're getting online and from other people, because we know people love to hyperbolize things. And so they internalize what people hyperbolize and talk them out of seeing this movie. And it's unfortunate because the sex in this film is a lot less graphic than like implied sex you see on a soap opera, for God's sake, sometimes, right? Like, I don't know. I just don't think it's as graphic as people are making it out to be. And like you said, Jim, it's cutting people off from what I think is a fairly lovely love story.
It's a fable, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely a fairy tale, right? Even the Richard Jenkins Giles character sets it up in the beginning by talking to us about, you know, a princess a while ago. Right? Yeah, let me tell you a story about da 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 da. So, you know, if you take it in that context, I mean, it's not a Disney movie, certainly.
No,
but it's also not like Eliza Does a Thousand Fish Sticks either.
No. Yeah, nope. This is not Short Bus. This is not Nymphomaniac. This is not any of the, like, this, again, like, there are so many ways that you've probably, you know, not you, but like, you know, person listening who hasn't made up their mind, that you've probably built this up into something that it's not. It is very tasteful. Like, that's the thing. Like, it is tastefully done. Like, if someone says that some of the violence in this is a little much for them, and granted, there's not a ton of it, but when it does, like, it's
pretty graphic.
Shy away from it. Yeah, I get that a lot more because some of that stuff is actually kind of squeamish, but the sex stuff is not. Not in the slightest. There's actually a comment here. I think that's Felipe, Voodoo57.
It is.
Says, none of the implied sex is graphic. It's subtle. The masturbation is subtle, filmed in a way that it's not in your face, very sensual. And I agree. Like, it's Guillermo del Toro shoots this. I think it'd be very easy for a director, a more novice director, to really use kind of the quote unquote male gaze in like over sexualizing like Sally Hawkes' body and not really, I don't know, playing the sex scenes up as well as they could be, but he doesn't. Like, this is a very give-take relationship between the two of them, at least from the physical standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. Another scene we should talk about comes like maybe about halfway through the movie, and it's the fantasy dance number, song and dance number. Very, very surprising that this scene was in the movie for me. How did you guys feel about that? I think for me, it felt a little strange. I understand the scene. I understand this dreamlike sequence. It's kind of like a, I don't know what they call it, but they basically cut away to this fantasy scene where she's singing it. Like, this is the only sung or spoken words that Sally Hawkins has, her character has in the movie. And for a minute there, I'm like, wait, is she actually singing? Like, what's going on here? And then it cuts to black and white, and it's obviously like a full-blown, like, Broadway song and dance number. What did you guys think of that?
For me, I quite enjoyed that scene. I think that scene does a couple of things very well. One of the big ones is, and I don't know if this is self-congratulatory for the film or not. I don't know if I care. For a film that's sort of set, sort of like just post McCarthy era-ish, right? For it to play into what really feels like a classic old Hollywood song and dance number, I think feels kind of fitting, right? Like, I think that it has a neat little niche within that particular story. Outside of that, it lets us explore kind of the fantasy and the joy and the excitement of this like kind of weird forbidden love in a way that the film hadn't allowed itself to show up to that point. So yeah, I had fun with the scene. I think it worked. I like that it was like a tonal shift, because I think the tonal shift was purposeful. Sometimes movies shift tone because the director doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. Right. I don't think that was the case here. No. This was a very specific and purposeful choice.
I think it was purposeful. I just don't think it was okay. It was fine. I just don't think it 100% worked for me. I think it maybe took me out of the film a little too much. It was kind of a little bit like a half a step over the edge for me, but still fine. It was fun. I almost kind of want to see the movie again just to see how that really would play for me the second time, where I know it's coming. Maybe it just caught me by surprise, I think. Brad, did you have a thought on that scene?
The song and dance number, yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I was not a fan of La La Land, and that's exactly where the scene took me at first. But then as the scene kind of went on, I don't know. I felt a little conflicted about it. On one hand, you know, we've had this character who hasn't been able to speak for the whole movie, and now all of a sudden, you know, we're getting like speaking and musical performance. And, you know, it was really jarring, and I was trying to kind of figure out like what was going on. Like, and then after that scene ends, like it's like she's talking as it's ending. Her lips are moving, and we hear a little bit. And I'm wondering to myself, like, does she actually have the capability to speak then? Because it sounded almost like she was whispering or something. And I was like, well, wait, thought she was mute. And then it was like, oh God, maybe through her like fish sex connection, it's like restored her voice. And this is how she's found out that she's now able to talk. And I'm like, this changes everything. But then she was still mute. And I was like, oh, wait, okay. So obviously it must have just been sort of that, you know how like dreams kind of overlap reality perception sometime, right? Yeah. I would say overall that scene sort of felt like the side quest to Canto Bight for me in The Last Jedi, but you know, mileage varies.
I had another question, and you guys, this has really could change the whole way I view this character in this movie. So I overheard somebody say, and I didn't hear this in the movie, that Sally Hawkins was, as a child, she was found on a beach or something. Did you hear this in the movie? Like she was orphaned, or she was found on a beach or something? Because somebody said that those marks on her neck that turned into gills in the last scene were not really scratches, that they may have been gills all along, and that she may have been pseudo related to the sea creature herself from the very beginning, and we just didn't know this. And that's why she had these dreams of the water, and she, at the beginning of the movie, she's floating in water, and also she has some kind of power over the water, like on the bus window. So there may be something there to that idea.
I wondered that too. It's funny that you say something there, because it's the title of a song from Beauty and the Beast, so that makes me chuckle. But yeah, I wondered about that too. Like, there's a scene where she's like on the bus and she's looking out the window and she's kind of tracing her finger on the window, and like the beads of water are like collecting and like following her finger on the window. And so I'm like, well, wait, is she like a water bender? Is she like controlling the water, or like what's going on, right? And then at the end, of course, she's able to breathe, you know, through the gills in her neck or whatever. I don't know though. I think kind of like this the singing and dancing scene, there's sort of this blending between like dream and reality. She's kind of like off in La La Land. Like she kind of is a little ethereal in some ways and gets lost in her own head. So I don't know that she's a mythic sea creature herself, but I could certainly see why people might think that.
And I think part of that comes from the fact that her backstory is intentionally ambiguous in this movie. You know, Yeah, I think it's something like she's found on a riverbank or something like that, and then went through orphanage, and she has some sort of trauma in her past that caused the scarring. I will say this, and this is just for me. Like I don't know for sure, and it's because her past is ambiguous. But I think that if she were secretly a sea creature or came from the sea or like had that sort of tie, and that's what it is, I think for me personally, that would almost cheapen a little bit, because I think what I like so much about this character is that she is a quote unquote broken outsider who is not broken by her injury, so to speak, who wears her scars proudly, but isn't definitely cowed by them. Yeah. Like the fact that she, if she were secretly a sea creature, I think would, for me personally, kind of rob from some of the richness of the relationships that she had with, Giles and Zelda. But that's just me.
Yeah, or you could look at it. I mean, those things would still be valid if she were only broken because she was a fish out of water, right? She was she was out of her comfortable element, and then at the end she's reintroduced to that. I mean, we don't get to see a lot of that, but I mean, I don't know. There's kind of a romantic arc to that as well. So I just wonder if there's any.
But how terribly convenient then that she ended up working in this facility where this creature ended up being brought out of all the government facilities in the United States, right? One sea creature ends up with another sea creature. I don't know. It doesn't really work for me, but I think it's romantic to think about that way.
And also from a meta perspective, I think that like Guillermo del Toro has said, like his inspiration for this was you get that classic poster of the creature from the Black Lagoon or some sort of monster spiriting away the human. And he wanted to subvert that and say, well, instead of him like abducting the woman, she's going willingly with him into the water. And so knowing that is his inspiration for making this movie leads me to believe that he, as the filmmaker, he didn't necessarily want us to interpret her as anything other than human. And of course, film is open to interpretation, and it sometimes evolves past even the director's original vision. That's one of the things that we as audiences do. We apply context and subtext and metatext and all of those things into what we see in the film, and we come away with our own interpretations. But just knowing what the filmmaker's intention was, and just kind of knowing my own interpretation, I don't see her as anything other than human. That said, it's fun.
I don't know if it would be any cheaper to think that that those marks on her neck were always gills, or they just happened to be convenient scars that conveniently turned into gills. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's just an interesting thought. They kind of sprinkled some of those seeds in the movie. It certainly wasn't. It's a layer. I'll call it a layer that you could kind of, enjoy the movie at.
Think of it like a parfait. You can eat the top layers and it's really good. You can dig down and eat the bottom layers if you want. Whatever part you eat, it's probably going to be
pretty good. Yeah.
So, and ogres are like parfaits. So,
but is it
so this is part of the Shrek universe, is what we have just played Shape of Water as this is Shrek 5, actually.
Is it as good as lime jello, though? We just need to know if it's as good as lime jello. Which, by the way, brings up one of my favorite scenes in the movie between Richard Jenkins and the guy behind the counter.
Oh, yeah.
It's time to wrap, and there's so much else we haven't talked about. But let's spend a couple minutes talking about that, because I think that's definitely worth unpacking a little bit, and then we'll transition.
Right. So there's just a pie restaurant that's down the street from where Sally Hawkins and Richard Jenkins' characters live. And there's a friendly server behind the counter. Richard Jenkins kind of like warms up to him during one scene and makes a kind of a soft pass at the guy, thinking that there's kind of a little bit of a gay vibe between the two. It turns out that Richard Jenkins, I think, was maybe misreading it, or the guy just had like a momentary like homophobic flash, like, oh my God, I really like this guy, but wait, I can't like him that much because now people are going to know. I don't know. It was a really interesting scene. I really liked it. Obviously, I was sad for the Richard Jenkins character because it really injured him a little bit, I think, emotionally. And you could probably sense that he'd gotten a lot of that in his life. Like, he's trying to find a relationship and he can't. And that was sad. And I think informed the characters in ways that made it much more rich for me.
Yeah, it definitely fed into his kind of otherness, which again is one of the themes of this movie. And what I like so much about this character is he's as much in the closet as I guess as anyone could be, kind of in the 60s, but he's actually making a pass at another man, and he's not necessarily hiding those aspects of himself from Eliza. So I like that this is a character who, I don't know if I would necessarily say unapologetically gay, but he is definitely like, putting himself out there. Whether or not this is more of like a gay panic retreat into a shell for the guy behind the counter, or if it's actually just like, oh man, you read the signals wrong. I think both of those interpretations work very well for the Giles character. And the fact that Giles went into it not knowing, and we walked out of it feeling heartbroken for him, but maybe still not even knowing. I think that all works.
Right. Absolutely. Yep.
I will say that the character arc of the Giles character gave me some PTSD flashbacks to a horrible boss I once had. Once upon a time, I used to do some graphic design work on the side. Photoshop has, come such a long way since those days. I don't even know how to use 95% of the tools in Photoshop anymore. But I remember, like, you'd go in, you get notes about what they're looking for. You're like, great, I have an idea of the concept. I'm going to put these things together. You bring it in. Oh, you know what? We thought red would be a good color, but could you make it blue? And that like woman that you drew, she looks really awesome, but her hands are like, they need to be longer than we told you to make them. And then you get like this whole list of things, and then you do it, and then they're like, oh, actually, we really like your original design. Let's go with that instead. It's infuriating, and I kind of love that the movie brought me back to that in a way. The big thing about movies for me is if they can make me feel something, even if it's a negative emotion, that's a really, really good sign for me from a film. And I think this one does that in so many little ways, even just like making lunch, whether it be like boiling your eggs as you're getting ready for work in the morning, or making a sandwich, or you're mopping the floor a certain way and talking to your friend. Like, these seem to be little realistic moments that pop into this film that I think ground what is an otherwise sort of romanticized fairy tale. And I think that's some of the strength of this film. If you didn't have some of that realistic grounding, it wouldn't work as well for me. So I'm really glad that the Richard Jenkins character didn't end up with the pie guy. I'm glad it sort of turned into this, what the fuck are you doing, man? Like, get away from me. Because I think, one fairy tale was probably enough in this movie. That may not win me any friends to say, but it's realistic for the time period.
No, the pathos is better for the character, and I think it's something that, as gay men, that's something that we've all had to tackle in our own lives. Like, when and how do I make that first pass at someone? Because let's face it, like, granted, like we weren't making passes at people in the 60s, but I think all three of us in our lives at one point or another has felt, if I say something to this person, I'm either going to end up in a relationship or punched in the face. And that's something that is very, very true to the gay experience, be it in the 60s or be it through our lives in hell in 2018 as well. So I think I love that there was that pathos, and that it did not work out very well for him, because it's part of our experience.
Right. Absolutely.
Indeed.
Good stuff.
Indeed. Great conversation. I know it's that time, so we need to draw things to a close. I feel like there's so much more we could talk about with this film. Maybe we can continue the discussion online if anyone wants to chat Shape of Water with us. Definitely drop us a message. We'll tell you how here in a little bit. But guys, let's transition to some plugs. Jim, what have you got this week?
So I'm going to plug a mini series that people can watch right now on Netflix. I know it's not a movie. There are a lot of great movies out right now some of which I can't see, and that's maddening to me as we approach the end of the year. But I'm going to plug something that everybody can watch right now. Well, everybody who has access to a Netflix account anyway. It's called Planet Earth 2. If you haven't seen the Planet Earth series, the first one, you really need to watch it. But Planet Earth 2, if you have like a good like high def TV or even a 4K TV or system, get this thing on there. This is a mini series produced by BBC America. It is narrated by David Attenborough. He's got such a distinctive, great voice, and the narration on these is great. There's some little like narratives that they set up with these voiceover. There's six episodes in this miniseries. Each one like an hour to an hour and a half long. They are fantastic. The photography is like you just in wonder every episode. Like, how do they get these shots in high definition? It's incredible. And I'm an animal lover. I'm a nature lover. It's right up my alley. I've only gotten a couple of episodes in so far, but it's fantastic. So check it out. It's called Planet Earth 2, and it's available right now on Netflix.
Awesome plug, Jim. Will, how about you? What have you got this week?
First of all, I'm surprised by your plug, Jim, because I was expecting you to go a different route. You're like, it's this series that's out right now, and it's on Netflix. And I'm like, oh, he's about to plug Dark, isn't he?
That's another one. Yeah.
And so when you said Planet Earth 2, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Dark's good too, but just
Dark is very good.
Yeah, I like the switcheroo. Yeah, for me, I want to plug something that is also on Netflix. It's one of those movies that came out this year. It's a Netflix original, and it's gotten a little bit of critical buzz, but it seems like it's sort of fallen through the cracks, especially as we hit award season. It's this movie called First They Killed My Father. This is a movie directed by Angelina Jolie, who I want to go on record as saying like is turning into a fine little director. Like she is putting out some solid stuff as behind the camera. So I'm looking forward to seeing what she has next. But so this film is set in the mid 1970s in Cambodia, and it follows this young girl. I think she's like 7 years old, named Luong, and she starts off as kind of the daughter of one of several kids of a government official. And once the Khmer Rouge takes over the government, and puts people off in camps, she has to go through all of that and becomes like a young child soldier. This movie is absolutely heartbreaking. This movie is absolutely solidly directed and solidly acted. We have a few different movies that it's sort of like, if this helps at all. It reminds me a little bit about Beasts of No Nations, which was on Netflix.
Yep.
Child soldiers. And also the way it follows the girl's story is a little bit like the Florida Project, in that because it's from the perspective of a young girl, the narrative isn't 100% like a one tight structured thing from start to finish. It's almost like a series of like vignettes or scenes or moments as a young girl might experience them. It is really well done. It's I think it was Cambodia's, because Angelina Jolie has dual citizenship. It was their Oscar suggestion, although it didn't make it to the short list. But yeah, it is a brilliant film. First They Killed My Father. It is a slow burn, but man, is it rewarding.
Very good.
Awesome.
I saw that one come by, and I knew I heard buzz about it. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm going to get back to that, but I haven't yet. That's all that's happened. Like, it's gotten very, very light buzz, but it didn't really click. And I wonder if part of that is because it's Netflix original. I think that maybe that carries, like, we had Okja and the Meyerowitz stories, and both of which were solid, and neither of which is kind of getting as much traction year end as I think they could. And I wonder if that Netflix stigma is a part of that. Maybe. Could be.
Very possibly. Well, definitely one to check out, it sounds like. For me this week is another movie that, Jim, I thought for sure you were going to plug it. And since you didn't, I'll take it. It's another film that Jim was looking forward to that I absolutely fucking was not looking forward to and did not want to see.
Which means it was great, right?
which means I really loved it. It was good. You can ask Jim when he's like, let's go see this movie. I was just like, really? Okay, fine. That, of course, is The Greatest Showman, starring Hugh Jackman, Zac Efron, Michelle Williams, Zendaya. I got to tell you, the trailer for this movie, I don't want to go too deeply into it. Did not turn me on, especially, I don't know. Hugh Jackman was a bit of a letdown in Les Mis for me. So I was like, oh, another Hugh Jackman singing movie. Great. But I actually really loved this. The music was fantastic. The story was great. It incredibly romanticizes and fantasizes P.T. Barnum and his life. But as musical films go, I think it was really fantastic. First thing I did walking out of the movie was buy the soundtrack. That should tell you something. I've been listening to the music quite a bit over the last couple of days, and it's a winner for me. So if you're looking for a film right now that, kind of tickles the little spots for you in terms of good music and good acting, and some really cool cinematography in this film, The Greatest Showman is definitely one that you should check out. So,
you know who would absolutely agree with you on that, Brad, is my boyfriend Scott. He walked out of that, and we both walked out of that one, and he turned to me and said, "This was my favorite movie of the year," and he bought the soundtrack immediately and has been playing it like a lot in the house. And the music is remarkably catchy. Not my favorite movie of the year, but we had a blast with it. And so, I mean, I think that it's one of those it's been getting panned, and I think a little unfairly so, mainly because I think it's getting panned because of the romanticizing of P.T. Barnum. But
you got to separate from that. The movie never wanted to do that. You know what I mean? And the movie never needed or wanted to be like, we're going to show you everything about P.T. Barnum. Like, we're going to give you this romanticized musical version of stuff that happened around this character. That's what you got.
Yeah, but it easily could have been about like somebody else, like a fictional version of P.T. Barnum or something, and gotten around that, I think. But because they chose to make it about a historical figure, unfortunately, that comes with certain chains and shackles that, like you said, Will, I think can kind of weigh this down a little bit. So, it's unfortunate that it's getting a little bit panned, but it is a really good movie. The music is great. Reminded us a lot of Lin-Manuel Miranda, actually. Some of the music is a little similar. Walking out of the movie, Jim was like, oh man, it sounds like it was him. It's not, of course, but if you kind of dig some of those musical stylings, I think you'd like the music in this film. So go check it out. Definitely.
Brad, to put you on the spot very, very slightly. So, we do a Spotify soundtrack for Movie Bears podcast each year where we take the big songs from the previous year and put them all together. And obviously one song, at least a song from The Greatest Showman, is going to make it on that just because it's a musical movie, right? So if you had to pick one song, the standout song, the one that's in your head, the one that you think best represents what this movie is about, what's the song?
Ooh, man, that's a tough one. Because there's so many great songs in this movie. I think probably Come Alive is a big one. And maybe The Greatest Show. The Greatest Show actually reminds me a little bit of Todrick Hall's Straight Out of Oz album.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
Yeah. So I don't know. It kind of called back to some of those musical stylings a little bit for me, so it resonates a lot. But I mean, I think I'd really need a good 20 minutes, Will, to like really figure out like what the best one is.
It's getting a lot of thumbs up from friends on Facebook. I mean, most of the people who are seeing this movie, I mean, different from the critics' view, because as you said, Will, the critics are mildly panning this one, but audience reaction, at least for the friends that are on audience friends that are on my Facebook, seem to be mostly digging it.
Yeah, definitely. So hopefully other people will see it. I didn't mean to have a whole 10-minute segment on this movie. You know me, I like to keep plugs brief, but
sometimes the conversation goes where the conversation goes.
That is true. That is true. So, well, guys, it's fun to be back in the saddle with you once again, now that we are past the holidays. I'm sure next year's holidays will be here before we know it. The years go by so quickly. But happy 2018 to all of you out there in listener land. Big thanks to all of you who are hanging out with us live this week. Felipe and Bobby and everybody else who was with us. Steve, great to see you guys. Also, big love to those of you who are catching us on digital tape delay through iTunes or Stitcher Radio, or even going back and watching the YouTube broadcast of the show. Even though you aren't listening live, we still love having you guys with us. Thanks for being part of something we love so much. We love to do this every week with you guys. So big win. Real quick, guys, if people want to connect with you online, how can they do that? Jim, go.
I'm on Twitter at JJP Out West. That's all one word, JJP Out West. I'm also on Facebook, of course, under my name, Jim Puliafco, right there on the bottom of the screen.
Boom. There you go. Will, how about you?
Yeah, hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Whatever Cove. Look for me on Facebook. I'm William Lindis. Send me a message first. My father is also on there, and he probably doesn't want to be friends with you. We have the same name, so that's part of that.
What's wrong with me that he doesn't want to be friends with me?
You're gay, but that's that's digging into a whole different side of my backstory. Anyways, you can also find me on Letterboxd, and I'm just William Lindis on there, and also I'm on Overwatch all the time. So just send me a message on Facebook if you want to play a few rounds with me.
Awesome. There you go. And you can find me on Facebook under Brad Harris. I'm the one with Mutual Bear and Chubb and Chaser friends. You can also find me on Twitter at iBradPro. It's in my little doohickey on the screen if you can see the video. You can also find me on Instagram at MSU Big Guy. Feel free to add me and let's strike up a conversation. Guys, it has been a pleasure. We will see you all next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.